Hi there, welcome to or welcome back to Freed's Books, where I read books and then I talk to you about them. I said I would try and do some weekly updates on what I've been reading, make my monthly wrap ups a little bit less, and just kind of engage with you a little bit more, hopefully. So I'm going to talk to you about what I read this last week. It is October 7th. The dog just came down to say hi. He just finished his dinner, apparently. So we're going to send him over to his bed. Hey, you can lay down right there. Good boy. So he's going to sit in the corner and he's going to watch. Okay, so I have not read a whole lot, but I did just finish a book today. So has been a full week of October. So I am so behind on things. Lately, I have been that person where I pick up something, I read it for like 30 minutes, and then I doom scroll. I walk out of the room, I pick up a project, I do this, I do that, I come back and I read like 15 pages. I am not doing well focusing right now, and it's been a struggle. But I did make a decision to DNF Sky on Fire by Jenn Lyons, not because I was disliking it, but it was my feelings about this are very complicated. Every time I think about this in the abstract, I really like it. It reads like a D&D campaign. You've got a lot of quirky characters. Everybody's very different. We're doing a dragon heist, but it's boring. Reading it is boring. And it's like every time we start to do something, we get distracted by something else. We go off on a side quest. We go do this, we go do that. And then we like eventually come back to the main plot. I DNF'd it 50% through and we were not doing anything yet. We had just got to the school. So essentially we're following Anarod M. Need. Jenn Lyons likes to give characters very odd names, which I'm not opposed to. It's just me pronouncing them is difficult. So she is kind of like a person of legend at this point. She was cast out of society because a dragon accused her of stealing from its hoard. And in this world, the dragons are the rulers above the rulers. The dragons are the highest level of society, and there's this whole myth that says that the gods created the humans to serve the dragons. So humans are second-class citizens, and then within the humans, you have other levels of like societal classes. And Anarod was thrown from one of the highest towers. She managed to survive. There's a whole thing about how and why. That's kind of a spoiler, so I'm not going to go from there. But in the very first chapter, she is kidnapped essentially by this group of people who want to bring her back. And this leads us to a dragon riders school. So we're in a world of dragon riders where dragons communicate with humans through like a telekinetic thing. And it gives us actually a pretty good reason of why the dragons need the humans, even though they very much detest them. There are some dragons that do like their humans, but for the most part, dragons as a society dislike humans, but they require them in order to stave off madness from an overwhelming abundance of magic. Humans handle magic better than dragons do, but dragons create more magic than they can handle. So they kind of need the humans as a dampening rod. So it creates this symbiotic kind of relationship with dragon riders then being some of the highest classes of society because of their relationship to the dragons, but they're very much kind of enslaved to the dragons in most cases. So very interesting kind of world building. It sounds interesting as hell. The execution of the story, I'm so bored. And I did try the audio on this one to be like, maybe I can get through it that way. So I did a sample, and I just don't like the narrator's voice. It's one of those voices that just does not work for me. So I'm just going to DNF it. I may pick it back up at another point in time. But right now, with my brain as scatty as it is, I was not focusing on this book enough. So me thinking it's going to be a short little thing. So I DNF'd that. I did just finish today the Crypt of the Moon Spider. I started this on Saturday. My boyfriend and I go out to a brewery every couple of weekends, and he smokes. I don't. When he goes out to smoke, I read a little bit of a book, and I usually get like 5 pages each time he goes out. Normally, I'd get about 10 pages because then I get distracted and stuff. So it was my turn to drive, so I was more focused on reading when he went out, and I managed to get like 25 pages into this, was really enjoying it, and put it aside yesterday and just finished the rest of it today. We are following Veronica, I believe, or Victoria. It's a V name. She suffers from depression. We're in alternate history 1920s, and to get her depression treated, she is flown to the moon. And on the moon, there is this facility that specializes in treating people with what they call the melancholy, because 1920s. They do it with special spider silk, and things are not exactly what they seem. All the reviews from this says that it is incredibly unsettling. It is very gothic. It is the book one of the Lunar Gothic trilogy, I believe is what it's called. Yeah, the Lunar Gothic trilogy. So it does have a lot of the Gothic elements. Reminds me a bit, I mean, I guess the story itself doesn't remind me of it, but the setting is, if you watched Ratchet on Netflix, reminds me of that type of setting. Very gothic, very spidery. It is not as unsettling as I expected it to be. I expected this to be like creepy. It was more gore, and there's a lot of spiders. And so I've spent and we're talking about brains, and there's a lot of like unscrewing people's brains, skulls type of thing. And so I was like, and like stitches in their heads. So I was just like this, like the whole last 70 pages of this book. And I was like, the story, this is like 99 pages. The story itself is 85. And then you get like 10 pages of the next book. Really interesting world we're setting up. We're dealing with some kind of Gangs of New York-ish type of vibes. not that era, like the Gangs of New York movie, but the different crime families in New York, fantasy versions of them. So this has a bit of sci-fi, a bit of fantasy, a bit of gothic. It's a very interesting genre crossing book. A little feminine ragey. It's kind of pushing it there. If you've read Lone Women, some of the aspects of this remind me of the phrasing, a woman is a mule. And our main character is kind of, as she's living through her memories, she's uncovering a lot of those aspects of things she didn't remember or necessarily understand her mother telling her about adulthood when she was a child. From that aspect of it, I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of women's lack of agency, and also just how people use people in general in here. It's really good, especially for how short it is, 85 pages. And once I actually had a chance to like sit down and read it, I ate it up. It's so good. I am 45% into The Mad Ship. This is a reread for me. I am so obsessed. This is book 2 of not the Farseer, sorry. This is the second trilogy that follows the Farseer trilogy. You don't have to read the Farseer trilogy to read The Mad Ship, but I do think it is more exciting if you do, because this happens, I believe it's supposed to be about 7 to 10 years after the events in the Farseer trilogy. And we're in a different part of the world, and there are some nods and some callbacks and some things explained. It won't spoil anything for you, but it will answer questions if you've read the Farseer. So this is the second book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy, and it's hard for me to say too much about it, but there are some characters in here. We're following the same characters. This is a multi-POV story. We have pirates. We have people living in a city that are a part of like a port city. We have so much. We have like sea serpents that have chapters. We have some kind of dragonish lore. We have some interesting magic system that is maybe not a magic, but we don't know at this point. And it has to do with these ships actually being alive. And it's fascinating, the world that Robin Hobb has built with this. My biggest thing with it right now is rereading it is really putting a highlight. I liked this series more than Farseer because we're highlighting more perspectives, and Fitz is you either love Fitz or you hate him. He's a bit like black licorice, like he's not for the weak. And he can be a bit of a pain to be in his head. Flowers in Fantasy Go has a shirt that says you can't spell suffering without Fitz chivalry. And yeah. So this trilogy has so much more diversity in characters, and also the women are centered in it. And I really like fantasy that puts women forward in a way that doesn't show just women suffering in a fantasy world because of fantasy misogyny. We have some aspects of that, but some of the women in the story have so much power behind the scenes, and there are some deeply misogynistic characters, but the world itself is not misogynistic. And I think Robin Hobb did a really good job with talking about how different regions have a different culture and women are treated differently in those different cultures. And so we do reference the Six Duchies a little bit, which is where the Farseer trilogy is set, and about how their women have more freedom to kind of do different things and take on different roles than Bingtown, which is where the traders live, the live ship traders and the new traders and stuff, where they live. And especially the live ship trader families, they're kind of like, their women almost have a role of almost a Victorian era-esque woman, where they're kind of expected to run the household, maybe more 1950s, but it feels a little like Victorian in the way that they're required to dress and act in public type of thing. But they have the role of managing the household and the finances and the servants and keeping the household running. But the way that Robin Hobb has shown us through her female characters, we have so many aspects of how this world would fall apart if the women weren't doing their part. We particularly talk about how the men who captain the live ships are gone oftentimes for a year at a time, and the women are solely responsible for keeping everything at home when they often have farms and other holdings, keeping those running while the men go off and all they have to focus on is captaining a ship. And the women run the family, they run the household, they run the finances, they do everything while these men are just out captaining a ship. And so one of our main characters, Althea, she starts out as like 18 or 19-year-old. And I realized when I was listening to Literary Diversion's live show, a lot of people don't really necessarily like Althea. I loved her. I saw a lot of my opinions on womanhood and expectations and stuff that I held at 19 in Althea, so it was really easy for me to identify with her. And in this book, she kind of goes through this growth where she does a lot of growing up, and she does even more introspection. She has a conversation with her friend Amber, who is a new trader, who is a bead maker. So she's an immigrant to this community. She's not fully accepted. And Amber has a lot of ideas that are different than Althea. We never really learn where Amber is from, but we know that she has connections with Six Duchies women. So she's used to women who have different roles. She's also ends up making friends with the enslaved people who get brought to Bingtown, because in Bingtown, slavery is illegal, but they have other immigrants from this country, Jamalia, where slavery is legal. So they're bringing slaves with them, and it causes this friction in the town. It's a really interesting political intrigue in this story. But one of the things that Amber has a conversation with Althea about is she asked her to look in, and she's like, would you ever be happy? Like, when you think about yourself, do you think about yourself as married? Do you think about yourself raising children? And because Althea is kind of grappling with the fact that she has had sexual experiences while not being married, because again, I said we're in this kind of conservative society, and Althea is kind of trying to figure that out because she's feeling a lot of shame, which is again also something that I resonated with from being that age. And I remember very much going through that experiences from the purity culture that was forced on me at that age. And so I really resonated with these conversations that she was having. And when Amber asked her, have you ever seen yourself married? Would you ever see yourself with kids? And she's like, and Althea's like, no, not really. And then she's like, but do you think that should mean that you should never be allowed to experience that type of pleasure? And Althea's like, damn. And that kind of conversation was so, I got a lot out of it the first time I listened to it. And I was like, I wish someone had said that to me when I was that age. And then the second time listening to it, I was still like, There's another scene where we have, we talk about the satrap, and so he is kind of like the king of Jamalia, and he has a charter with Bingtown. And in his charter, in Bingtown's charter, they're kind of ruled by him and they pay taxes, but they're free to make their own rules, essentially. So he decides he's not happy with this and he wants more money from them and all this type of stuff, right? So he gets convinced he has this woman who is called his heart companion. There are multiples of them, and she's a leftover from his dad's reign. And so she is actually an expert on Bingtown, and he kept her around for nefarious reasons that I won't get into because it makes me too mad, and I'm just about to get to those scenes, and I'm very much putting it off because of those scenes. So, but he has this, so he goes to Bingtown and he brings her, and they're on the ship along with one of his other companions, which is more of a person there for his personal pleasures of the flesh type of companion. And Cirilla is the one who's the expert, and Keki is the one who is an escort, a glorified concubine, unfortunately. But she is so much more, and I'm like, oh, her, yeah. Anyway, I was listening to it, and Cirilla mentions about how Keki was being jealous and trying to keep the satrap for herself and stuff. And she was like, honestly, I don't care. The more she wants to be jealous, the less I have to deal with him. And knowing what I know from book 3, I was like, oh, Keki was actually doing that to be a girl's girl. And the fact that she was doing that and Cirilla was just like, disgusting. Like, I really like Cirilla aspects of her, but I also, other aspects of her, I'm like, you are so not a girl's girl. Like, come on, figure this out. And I just, there's so many different dynamics in here. I could go on and on about the different women in this story, but I'm just, the way that Robin Hobb has illustrated all of them and how this story really focuses on the women in the story and the kind of unvoiced supporting, not unvoiced, unacknowledged supporting roles that women play, is just, they're so good. It's done so well. There's also a character here, Brashen, who is just a straight up example of how the patriarchy hurts everybody, because he could be such a good man, but he has some of these views that are instilled on him through patriarchal things that I'm like, God, Brashen, stop. Like, and he himself has been injured through these expectations and societal expectations and stuff. So again, I love Robin Hobb. I am absolutely obsessed with this series. I am so glad I decided to pick it up again, and I can't wait for the next live show to talk about this one, because I have so many things that I want to see if other people say. So I'm trying to remember to write some stuff down, because I read these back in June, so this is me rereading them and trying to not just devour it like I did before, but kind of soak it in and think about it a bit more, because honestly, I mean, when I read it the first time, it's all I was thinking about. But I'm trying to it's so different when you read something the second time through, and the things that once you know the ending of the story, or at least of this arc of the story, there are so many things that you pick up on. You're like, oh, that was such good foreshadowing. Oh, that aspect of this person's character that was so good for how the growth changed. And then this thing that they were doing it for this specific reason, but you didn't see it in the moment because you were in the other person's POV, who was just viewing them do it and being like, God, why would this person do that? And so it's just so good. The dog is getting upset with me for talking, so we're going to try and wrap this up soon. So this is the last thing I'm reading. I'm not as far into it as I would have liked to be, because again, like I said, I keep picking things up and putting them down. So I was supposed to be here roughly on day 4, and we are on day 7. So I have a lot more to go. I should be right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. At the end of today, I should be right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I get to that point. So at the end of today, I should have been to here, and you can see my bookmark of where I actually am. So we are not on track for this. So I'm reading Eragon as a buddy read with both my best friend and Rachel Reads Fantasy on Instagram. She has read it before, my friend and I have not. And it's just been really fun to talk about it and Storygraph as we get through certain things. We're following Eragon, who has found a dragon egg. And at this point, he's learned that there's another person in his world who knows more about it. The dragon has hatched. She has grown quite a bit. He's had his first ride and completely shredded his legs on her scales. And our current conversation is that, why didn't this happen to the people in Fourth Wing? How are they riding around without saddles? and not having their legs just like completely shredded. So yeah, again, enjoying this. This is my look into YA that I missed when I was younger because I wasn't reading YA at the time. So that's kind of what I'm reading. Little life update. My salmon season is almost coming to an end. So once that's over, I will probably have a little bit more like brain power. I'm also just now, speaking of brains, done imaging all of the fish brains that I collected this year. And now I'm going to start analyzing them. So I'll have to spend less time in the lab breathing in fumes, which is always a good thing. But I'll be doing a little bit more analysis. So hopefully it'll be a little easier for me to read, but we'll see. And then my sister's dog is needing a winter jacket. So I did order her one, but she also asked me to make him one. So I found this nice green waterproof and this to line it with. So we're going to make him a like horse blanket style, and I've got some insulation stuff. So that's a current project I'm working on, and I'm really excited about that. So I'm going to be starting that while listening to the Live Ship Traders, and I will check in with you soon next week to let you know what I'm reading, and I'll have a review for you this weekend.